I was just seeing the latest graph. I mean, from about 1,000 deaths per day in beginning of February, now it's coming to single digits in the UK. So it's because they went full steam on vaccination, and they had enough of vaccine supplies, essentially from AstraZeneca. So I think we'll have to get there. The question is, how do we get there?
Hi everyone, so we're back. Professor Raja Mohan is here once again, who is, as you know, a contributing editor for the Indian Express on foreign affairs, as well as as the director of the South Asia Institute at the National University of Singapore. We missed last week. Sorry, I had a COVID scare. I was down with the virus, but we're here again. Sir, lots been happening. This time you've written about India and Britain, because there's the virtual summit will happen and then a larger one later. One of the things you've pointed out is the degree to which Britain can help. Right now, the big thing on top of mind for everyone is the pandemic and the shortfalls we're facing. We begin the article with that. Do you think, though, given that, how long do you think this effect in a larger sense? Because still about a month ago, India, this vaccine diplomacy was our asset. Being the sort of global manufacturer for vaccines, we were in a position to use the pandemic somewhat to our advantage. I mean, the role we were in, and that has been reversed. Now, vis-a-vis Britain, or even in the larger sense, how do you think now this pandemic will affect that kind of our standing in the world, or our bargaining power, or however you put it, whatever we were gaining from that vaccine diplomacy, has that been diminished right now?
No, I mean, I think the setback at this moment is, I mean, there is no doubt about it. Given the intensity of the crisis that we are facing in India, all effort is to really focus on that, get the relief, get things under control over this crisis. But at the same time, we also have to invest in creating the long-term capabilities. That there is setback to the vaccine production and diplomacy. I mean, there is no doubt. But the question is, down the line, we have to produce more vaccines to be able to immunize most of the Indians, and then this is not going to be a one-year affair. I mean, that probably like flu, I think people might have to take a vaccine every year, a booster shot often. So I think creating the capabilities to produce vaccines in India remains critical for the long-term health of the nation, and not even long-term. I mean, talking about next year, we'll still need more vaccines. So I think we need to work with all our partners, even as we provide the relief. Can we make the foundation? Can we lay the foundation for greater production of vaccines in India, more research on epidemiology, more collaboration on the biomedical sciences? All these become important, both to create national capabilities and to address the challenge. We have the AstraZeneca, the British vaccine, being produced in India, but that too appears to have run into problems. So while the Quad, the G7 are I believe, going to talk about medical supply chains. So hopefully there are some solutions by which India can expand its production of vaccines. So I think that's going to be a key issue, both in the bilateral summit as well as in the G7 summit that's going to take place.
Just as a follow-up to this question, do you think, I mean, there's been so much, I know that it's not how it was meant to be, but this focus on Atmanirbharta, both in terms of trade and foreign assistance, as well as this, do you think that the time is now to invite collaboration for India? I mean, in that sense, the crisis could be an opportunity to say, we need help, but we have manufacturing capacity. Maybe we need technical expertise. Maybe we need certain kinds of collaboration, and use that as a linchpin or as a building block to move forward.
No, I mean, Atmanirbharta is a longer term aspiration. I mean, I think certainly in the case of the medical side, we've seen on the pharmaceutical side, the supply chains are long. I mean, I think as we now found, there are dependencies with the United States. There are interdependencies with China. But the fact is, you had enough capability to produce the vaccines. And that's how you had two companies and 2 or 3 others in the process of producing, which is not what many countries have. So therefore, you have some capability. The question is, you have some existing capabilities. The other partners in G7 might be open to pooling our resources and to produce more vaccines. And I think if we can get an agreement on that in the next few days, at least for the future, I mean, we'll have the capacity to ramp up the production of vaccines, which is only solution, as we've seen in the British case. I was just seeing the latest graph. I mean, from about 1,000 deaths per day in beginning of February, now it's coming to single digits in the UK. So this is because they went full steam on vaccination, and they had enough of vaccine supplies, essentially from AstraZeneca. So I think we'll have to get there. The question is, how do we get there?
So now the focus of your piece, of course, was India-UK relations. It will be in the link description here. It's on the indianexpress.com. Everyone should go read that for a little more depth and perspective on the matter. So one of the things you hint at is that in Britain, it used to be Labour was considered more pro-India, the Conservatives not as much because of their romance with the Raj. And that has been changing. To what extent is the domestic politics of Britain affecting bilateral relationships, as well as, I think another thing you pointed out as the second part to this question is, the South Asian dynamic has a distinct impact on British politics. And how does that play out for us in terms of our bilateral relationship with England, with Great Britain?
No, I think it is a challenge, actually. I think if you see where has Indian diaspora done well, I mean, I think really UK, the United States, Australia, Canada, these are the English-speaking world where the Indian diaspora has settled down, has thrived, and very well. But then that these are democracies, and lobbying for your cause is legitimate. So most of these groups, I mean, do like all groups in the US or in UK, campaign for their own specific community interests. But given the internal disputation in India has grown dramatically, some of that is getting reflected in the communities that live there, and they take it up with their politicians, who then raise the issues. We've seen that most recently in the case of the formulas, but going much before. I think whether it is the Sikh separatism in India or whether it is the Kashmir question, that the or Sri Lanka question, for example, the Sri Lankan Tamil question, that was a problem for Sri Lanka. For Pakistan, there is a continuous pressure that its minorities mobilize support in exactly the same countries where they too are in large numbers. So I think this is a new condition. As our diaspora has expanded, South Asian diaspora, its politics become domestic politics in these countries. And UK, it is, given the country's size, the size of the relative weight of the diaspora is large. So therefore, we're seeing some of that. There's no way of escaping that. But I think there are still two governments that have to deal with each other. The question is, can we find ways to minimize tension over this? That India will say, look, of course, any British citizen is free to demonstrate against Indian High Commission. But if they start throwing stones, I mean, then there is concern that, look, is London doing enough to protect Indian? I think those kind of issues have emerged in the recent years. But my sense now is there is a new commitment under the Boris Johnson government, which is the Tory government, that they want to take this relationship forward. I mean, now, in the past, because of the domestic politics in UK, then the question of India believes UK was always tilted towards Pakistan. British say, look, we are being just even-handed. But today, I think that as we've seen in the case of the United States, where the US today has an India-first policy towards the region, India will hope that, look, Britain too will adopt some of that position, because you can't tell other people not to have relationship with Pakistan.
Yeah.
But I think if we expand our own bilateral relationship, strengthen the weight of commerce, security, and other cooperation, and on climate and on health, then I think that very weight of our own bilateral engagement will reduce the irritants, for example, on the diaspora politics or on the Pakistan question that has troubled the bilateral relationship. And where Labour, we've seen this happen with the liberal sections. I mean, Labour and Liberal have become far more critical of India, and the Conservatives see India far more on an interest-based prism. So I think that is the inversion that has taken place in Britain that India has to deal with.
So the final question, I mean, again, it's not directly related to your piece, but I think it will come in, is that, when we're looking at these kinds of expansions, say Britain post-Brexit, the idea was that that was an opportunity for India, as you've written in previous columns, because Britain will be looking now to, outside of Europe, establish strengthen bilateral ties where it has traditional influence or friendships. How do you think that's playing? There is a sense now, whether it's true or false, especially in the last week or so, most recently with this oxygen with the New Zealand embassy, that India and this Australia, responding to a report in the Australian, by the High Commission in a very oddly worded letter, a very undiplomatic letter from a diplomatic mission. How do you think these seem like small, stray incidents among, between great nations, but do you think it adds up to the perception that India is this great thing, that India had arrived on the world stage as a mature middle power looking to make its presence felt? Does it make us seem petty to a degree that is just, I mean, the risk-reward ratio for, say, this kind of political response to a state political response to what are essentially minor matters?
No, I think quite clearly there's so much pressure on the Indian state today. And I think given the fact that the capital of India is in such a deep crisis, so I think that pressure itself, I think creates conditions for people to depart from the norm. And I think that is the tragedy that is unfolding. But I think my sense is that, look, if India eventually will recover from this, then I think we need to get back to more normal engagement. And the cost of this crisis, there will be costs. There's no escaping that, because once a crisis of this proportion unfolds, there will be some damage. But my sense is in India that gets its act together, overcomes this crisis, because eventually the rest of the world is not just going to ignore India, or India cannot do without the rest of the world. So we'll have to find new ways of connecting with the world, and as you said, in a responsible and mutually beneficial manner. But I think it is possible, and we have no choice but to get there.
Great, sir. Thanks a lot. We'll do this again next week. Please do check out the article, anyone who's watching this. It is on the indianexpress.com/opinion. Okay. Thanks so much.